focus, especially if we are interested in the mastery of the topic. At the end of the presentation, I will ask everyone to please fill out a quick 2-question survey. We are going to cover 3 areas. Storytelling, what is it really? We shall briefly discuss pure storytelling versus narrative design in game production. And then the longest portion of this presentation involves the practical crafting of emotional experience in a story. In particular, we will present one technique that you might find useful in your own storytelling. Okay, so here we go. Storytelling, what is it really? So I'm going to try and go to the next slide, if my computer will respond. I'm going to answer this question by asking all of you a question. Which of the following 2 roller coaster rides looks the most fun? Do you choose A, this roller coaster ride? Or do you choose B, this roller coaster ride? For most people, hopefully, the answer is B. If you honestly chose A, I don't know what to say, but most people would choose B. So my entire presentation can be summarized with those 2 images. If you take away nothing else from this presentation, then just remember these 2 images. Specifically, when you write stories, do this over here on the left. Don't do this crap on the right. The presentation's over. Okay, you can all go. Just kidding. All right, so roller coasters, they thrill our bodies, and stories thrill our minds and hearts. What do roller coasters need to give us in order to be fun? They give us extreme movement. A roller coaster throws your body around. Likewise, what do stories need to give us in order to create joy or anguish? Again, extreme movement, but for our emotional bodies, so to speak. If we do not throw their emotional bodies around, then we have built a flat roller coaster, otherwise known as a boring story. Okay, so seriously, what is storytelling really? It is nothing more than the art and craft of guiding people through a ride. What kind of ride? An emotional ride, otherwise classically known as the hero's journey. We are a game studio, of course, and this presentation is happening in the context of the Job Family Champions program. So we need to steer this discussion to narrative design. Storytelling and narrative design aren't quite the same. Narrative design generally falls into 2 categories. First, you have the people who are responsible for writing, adapting, and optimizing stories for games on various platforms like console, PC, mobile. Very often these platforms are weak in some storytelling aspects and strong in others. The job basically entails avoiding the weaknesses of the platform while accenting the strengths. So for example, mobile devices are generally horrible narrative platforms. Storylines must be delivered to players in the length of short tweets, essentially telling a complex story 144 characters at a time. They also have strengths. They have visual and audio capacity, and they are far more accessible to everyday people on the move than a book on your shelf at home. The second category of narrative designers is far more technical in nature. Their work often overlaps with direct production activities, and their job often requires working familiarity with game engines and software languages. So over the years, the first category of narrative designers is slowly coming to dominate the role. This is the work that most people agree that a narrative designer must be able to do. Now, there exist reasons for this continuing evolution about narrative designers going in one direction. First, the truth is, no 2 games ever possess the exact same narrative design, for the simple reason that the UI is different. Even games that are produced in the same series don't possess the same narrative design. Technology advances, the platforms change, the game developers themselves often want to upgrade everything that the previous game did. So if you place the narrative design of Baldur's Gate 1 onto Baldur's Gate 2, it would be a disaster. So the technical aspects of narrative design are constantly in flux. Whenever a studio seeks narrative designers with specific technical skills, they potentially find it difficult to find many candidates. So what is the common skill that all narrative designers are expected to possess? They're expected to possess the skill of storytelling. And just a request for everyone to just check their mics to see if they're muted. So storytelling is a skill that never changes in the role. So if a studio must make a choice between hiring a narrative design candidate A with no game experience, but exceptional raw storytelling talent, and narrative design candidate B with solid storytelling skills and good experience, it's potentially a very difficult choice. Why? Because a studio can always train a responsible and competent adult to use a system or an engine or write in a format. What they can't easily do is upgrade a person's core narrative abilities, which is often the result of mentoring and countless hours of self-practice. Good stories are not written, they are crafted, and we're about to see that. So what's the takeaway? For most roles across the game industry, the key skill for narrative design actually is storytelling. So we've come back to our foundational skills. How do we make our storytelling so powerful that people remember it when they think of their childhoods? How do we make our storytelling so powerful that it can actually make players feel happy or sad or terrified? We're going to discuss that now. So how do we construct the emotional roller coaster? There are two things that we must do. Number one, we write strong scenes. A story is nothing more than a long sequence of scenes, and all of them must be strong. What is a scene? A scene is simply a setting with one or more characters in it who perform actions and speak dialogue. The purpose of the scene is to convey crucial information about the plotline of the story. Regardless of the format, movies, games, TVs, novels, comics, scenes are the emotional building blocks of all your storytelling. The analogy holds true even farther. Weak scenes create a weak, boring story. Strong scenes create a strong and interesting story. And we're about to see exactly how. So what is a strong scene? A strong scene conveys information through cinematic context and contrast. A strong scene minimizes the use of dialogue to communicate crucial story information to readers. We need context and contrast. Let's start by discussing context. Context simply refers to the background situation that defines the mood and atmosphere of each scene. Context answers the question, what is the purpose of this scene? Let's run through an actual example. Here's an example of a boring, unemotional scene. Let's pretend a man approaches a woman on the street. Man says hi. The woman says hi. What is your name? Mary. Hi, Mary, my name is John. What are you doing in this neighborhood? Nothing in particular. So this scene is boring because it has no context. What is the purpose of this scene? Currently, the purpose is merely to provide information about the man and woman. It's boring. It contains no emotion. Now, let's look at this scene again. The man approaches the woman, but this time pulls out a gun. Hi, what is your name? Mary. Hi, Mary, my name is John. What are you doing in this neighborhood? Nothing in particular. The scene feels very different now. It contains the same spoken information as before, but the purpose is now to deliver an implied threat from the man to the woman. The existence of the threat is now more important than the dialogue itself, and in fact is more important than almost any dialogue these characters could be speaking. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and context delivers key parts of that picture. Okay, so there are endless varieties of context, only limited by our imaginations. So, scene B. What if instead of a gun, what if the woman was rushing to work and would be fired if she arrived late? The scene becomes about the man endangering her livelihood over a trivial conversation. Scene C. The man knows the woman is walking towards a ticking bomb. The scene becomes about the man trying to save the woman's life by delaying her. What if? What if? So, when assessing the skills of a storyteller, we must always look closely at their scene discipline, because 3 different scenes can possess the exact same dialogue, but tell wildly different stories. The best writers will instinctively use context to tell the story rather than dialogue. They possess the ability to maintain high literary quality over a long chain of sequential scenes. So now let's look at contrast, right? Contrast in storytelling means that something must drastically change in the scene. A power relationship between 2 or more people must shift, or a situation or condition in the scene must flip to its opposite. Contrast is the mini roller coaster added to your scene. Now, contrast must be added not just in one scene, but in every single scene of your story. Let's examine our scene again through the eyes of contrast. Okay. Hi. What's your name? Mary. Hi, Mary, my name is John. What are you doing in this neighborhood? Nothing in particular. So the power relationship favors the man because he initiates the conversation. Let's flip it. Let's flip this power relationship. In reaction, the woman suddenly shoves him away. Notice that when combined with context, the contrast adds the emotion. So for scene A, if the man carries a gun, then the woman's reaction is a strong act of self-defense. If the man is delaying her from getting to work on time, then shoving him is an act of impatience and maybe even desperation. If the man is trying to keep her away from a ticking time bomb, then the woman just sealed her tragic fate. Now, the second thing we must do to create strong emotion, okay, so this is actually leaving the scene topic behind. The second thing we must do to create strong emotion is to build the contrast into the giant macro structure of the entire story. And many tools and techniques exist to do that. We will explore one of the most familiar concepts across narrative industries. We will discuss the infamous 3-act structure. Now, most people know the term 3-act structure, but what is it? Literary agents, managers, movie producers, game developers will all ask you for it. The answer is that 3-act structure is fundamentally a model of storytelling that forces writers to build contrast into their plot lines, and to do so without maybe even understanding what exactly it is they're doing. So it's like training wheels for writers. And I do encourage all aspiring writers to indeed follow 3-act structure. Okay. Now, the problem with saying 3-act structure is that it's so big and so broad that I don't really find that aspiring writers find it very useful as a way to plan out their stories. It's so big, it's so broad. The beginning, the middle, the end. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Is this a useful way to present it? Not really. How about this? Is this a useful way to present 3-act structure? Can you look at this and go like, oh, okay, I know how to map out the story I have in my head? I don't think so. It's a little more helpful, but not really. So many presentations of 3-act structure are too general to be useful to aspiring writers. I like to explain 3-act structure as it applies to movies. Unlike novels, comics, short stories, movies tend to be universal experiences. Everyone you know will eventually go see a movie at some point. So let's lift the movie curtains, lower the lights, and see what movie 3-act structure looks like through the lens of contrast. All right, let me just take a drink here. Okay, so study this graph. This is a graphic representation of what contrast looks like in a story. The x-axis going from left to right represents the hero's progress through the story from beginning to end. The y-axis going up and down represents their experience along the way of triumph, joy, and happiness on the top side, defeat and humiliation and pain on the bottom side. The pendulum swing of the hero going up from defeat to victory is experienced by viewers as happiness, and the pendulum swing of the hero going down from victory to defeat is pain. If the hero has a happy ending in Act 3, if your hero has a happy ending at the end of your story, then the emotional roller coaster demands that the hero suffer an equivalent defeat in the middle of your story at the end of Act 2. Without that defeat, you have no roller coaster. You've not given people a ride. We've not given people a ride. So this is how writers create emotional experiences in storytelling. Emotional experiences that feel intense and real, experiences that can remain with viewers for a long time. It is simple, isn't it? And of course, difficult to master. The more extreme you make the contrast, the more exciting and suspenseful your story will be perceived. The catch is, extreme contrast must still be plausible and believable, else the emotional power is lost. So it cannot be overemphasized. The more extreme you make your contrast in your story, the more emotionally powerful it will be experienced. If your character is a rich billionaire at the end of your story with a mansion on the Pacific Ocean, then in the middle of the story, he needs to be naked in the cold weather on the streets with no shoes, no food, no love, nothing. And if you can believably transport him from that to the end, you will have created a powerful journey indeed. So this graph is nice, but it's still too conceptual to be useful for aspiring writers. So let's break 3-act structure down into even smaller steps. I'm going to hold your hands. I would like to do that, and I'm going to hold your hands now and walk you through the creative process. Let's see how a typical blockbuster movie builds the emotional roller coaster. The emotional journey begins like this. Step 1 is hopefully extremely obvious. You always start with your main character. Strive to introduce your main character in your story. Strive to answer the following questions. What does the hero love? What do they hate? What do they want? What do they need? And what do they fear? Use context and contrast to answer these questions. Avoid dialogue, because by using it, you are essentially explaining your story, not telling it. Step 2, define the hero's world, define the problem being faced. The problem, oh, by the way, if we're talking about a movie, many of these steps take about 10 pages. So that's generally the length you're looking at. The problem is typically an enemy or a situation that threatens something that the hero loves. The problem exists because the hero lacks something that she needs. The key to solving the problem is often found in something that the hero fears and hates. This is why you're answering these questions, so that you can write the solutions later in the story. Step 3 ends Act 1. Even though the problem exists, the hero is not motivated to solve it. So in order to force the hero to embark on her journey, the writer must create an event known as the inciting incident. The inciting incident positions the hero, or something loved, under imminent threat. This must not be the hero's choice. The hero needs to be compelled and forced to embark on the journey. If you want the emotional power, it cannot be a choice. They have to go on the journey. In most movies, the inciting incident occurs at the 30-minute mark, and you can usually time your watch to it. Step 4 brings us to what is known as the false revelations and false assumptions of the hero. The hero is assuming something very wrong about his or her situation. The hero fundamentally misunderstands something that will prevent the problem from being solved. This false information seduces the hero because it feeds an idea that the hero wishes was true. Step 5 and 6 can be discussed together. Based on the false assumptions, the hero must make 2 failed attempts to solve the problem. These failed attempts usually do not represent single scenes, but rather long sequences of scenes that are dominated by a theme. The second failed attempt usually teases the hero with near victory. Step 7 brings us to the end of Act 2, the end of the middle of the journey. After a great struggle, all the hero's progress vanishes into nothing. The 2 failed attempts leave the hero in an even worse position than before. In fact, it would have been better if the hero had done nothing at all. One of the most emotionally powerful themes to explore here is the idea of self-undoing. Even though the hero has an enemy to defeat, ultimately the hero is responsible for her own misery. Now, if your story ends in the hero's victory, remember, then the principle of contrast demands that these scenes here feel utterly hopeless. Step 8 is known as the true revelation. The hero finally realizes the true nature of the problem. The truth is painful to learn, but the defeats of Act 2 give the hero the necessary humility to accept it. As long as the truth is revealed at great cost, the purpose of the true revelation is served. In action, thriller, horror, or mystery movies, this moment is often called the twist. Perhaps a betrayal is revealed from an unexpected direction, or maybe the hero is made aware of an even greater danger than she originally had been fighting. Step 9. At last, in possession of the truth, the hero makes one final desperate attempt to solve the problem. Now, very often this attempt requires some kind of sacrifice from the hero. In action movies, these scenes contain the final battles between the heroes and villains. And now this is a very important point, and a lot of people often forget it when they write their stories. Everything that appears in these scenes should be bigger, better, and more clever than anything you've written previously. You always save your best material for last. And finally, step 10 ends your journey to the climax. You've plunged your readers and audiences into hell. Now reward them for going on the journey with you. Show the hero's hard-won fulfillment. The hero is a better person. The world is a better place. Vital life lessons have been learned. Provide your readers with an emotional catharsis so that they can walk away from your story feeling satisfied. And congratulations, you've reached the end of your story. Now, Let's end our session by quickly walking through a real movie example to see how it all works. So this movie I have chosen is called Inside Out, produced by Pixar and distributed by Disney. Most of you have seen this movie, hopefully. If not, I do highly recommend it. It actually is a movie about what we are talking about, emotion. Here's how Pixar treats three-act structure. Okay, step one. A little girl named Riley is born. She hates broccoli. Inside Riley's head, we meet the hero, a personified emotion named Joy. Joy is able to control Riley's actions by using a console inside the headquarters of Riley's mind. Joy loves Riley and wants the little girl to be happy. Step two. 4 other personified emotions exist alongside Joy. Anger's job is to make sure Riley is treated fairly. Disgust's job is to protect Riley's health and social status. Fear's job is to protect Riley from danger. However, Joy doesn't know the purpose of sadness. Sadness herself doesn't even know her own purpose. As a result, Joy dislikes sadness and keeps her away from the console. Altogether, the emotions create core memories inside Riley, and these core memories act as a power supply for these personality islands that float out in the distance outside headquarters. Can I take a sip here? Okay. Act 3, climax. Riley turns 11 and the family decides to relocate to an unfamiliar city. Riley quickly becomes frustrated. Her father overworks. The pizza is served with broccoli. Her family belongings get delayed in shipping. All her friends are gone. Finally, Riley cries in school, and this event creates her first core memory of sadness. Horrified, Joy tries to dispose of the new core memory, but in a struggle with sadness, she knocks all the other core memories loose. The personality islands lose their power, and then Joy and sadness are sucked out of headquarters through a memory tube. Without the core memories, Riley's personality islands grow dead. Riley becomes numb to life, and this forces Joy to search for a way back to headquarters. She embarks on the journey. So, step 4. What is Joy's false assumption from which she is basing all her actions going forward? Joy assumes that Riley needs to feel more happiness. Therefore, she believes herself to be the only emotion that can help Riley. Step 5. Joy makes efforts to find a path back to headquarters through the personality islands. Unfortunately, Riley's personality islands begin to self-destruct. Their destruction denies Joy any direct paths forward. Meanwhile, in the real world, Riley's life grows more dangerous. The little girl contemplates running away from home. Step 6. Joy and sadness continue their journey together. They encounter Riley's imaginary friend Bing Bong and his magical rocket wagon. Joy again tries to return to headquarters using Bing Bong as her guide, but she nearly dies in the attempt. Meanwhile, Riley's life continues to fall apart. She alienates her own family and friends, and she even buys a bus ticket to go back home. Desperate to return to headquarters, Joy is now willing to abandon sadness behind. She attempts to return to headquarters by using a recall tube. The Act 2 climax. Joy's second attempt fails. She falls into the memory dump, a massive pit where Joy might be lost forever. In this scene, the filmmakers have reinforced the idea of Joy's defeat by placing her physically at the lowest and darkest part of her world. Even Joy herself experiences deep despair. Step 8, the true revelation. While down in the memory dump, Joy finds a unique memory that belongs to Riley. Strangely, Riley's memory begins sad, and then the memory turns happy when Riley's family comes to comfort the girl. Joy finally realizes the purpose of sadness. The purpose of sadness is to alert Riley's family and friends that the girl is emotionally overwhelmed and needs their help. Joy also realizes a very painful truth. Despite her best intentions, her actions have not been helping Riley. Instead, they've been hurting the girl. The final desperate attempt to solve the problem. So in possession of the truth, Joy resolves to escape the memory dump and return Sadness to headquarters. Sadness doesn't make things easy. She flees Joy because of the earlier betrayal. However, Joy is now willing to sacrifice herself so that Sadness can help Riley. With the help of Bing Bong's rocket wagon, Joy escapes the memory dump, and then she heroically returns Sadness to headquarters. Notice how many times, if you've seen this movie, notice how many times that Joy is sailing through the air. The filmmakers are reinforcing the contrast with the Act 2 defeat by placing Joy physically at the highest and brightest part of her world. Contrast, 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 contrast. So, and finally, we're at the end. Back at headquarters, Sadness takes control of the console. In the real world, Riley breaks down and cries. She confesses her feelings to her parents. She misses her old life. Riley's parents explain that her feelings are normal. They comfort her with a long hug. At the console, Sadness invites Joy to join her, and to their surprise, they create a complex core memory that combines Joy and Sadness. This new core memory restores the personality islands in a better and more glorious form than they had existed before. And a year later, we see that Riley has readjusted to her new situation. The emotions now work harmoniously together and allow Riley to live a more emotionally complex life. So, storytelling isn't easy, but it can be made easier. You don't have to write out full stories to become a better creative thinker. Just walk yourself through the outlining process of your new story ideas. By doing so, you'll make storytelling into a muscle memory. And I'm a firm believer in walking through the motions so that it just becomes easier and easier and easier. And I assure you that with the right framework and structure, the blank page will not be intimidating to you at all. But remember, use context, use contrast, and make it a ride. Thank you, everyone. This is the end of the presentation, and I am happy to take any questions